Who Gives a Shit
podcast.
Well, hello there. In case someone is listening, this is Eve. I've been thinking of doing this for a while, but then I thought like, who cares? But actually, if just one person cares, then it's worth it. With everyone being stuck at home at the moment, I think right now is a pretty good time. Also for me before I become senile or something. Just like a memoir kind of situation. I'm not of the generation who is really comfortable speaking to themselves while recording themselves. That would be up to the YouTube kids, but here we go. I thought we start off with how my first band came about. I've given a lot of conflicting information over the years, so let's go back and see what's up. With the band, the first band, Sanguis Cinis, is how I pronounced it. People have been pointing out that it's wrong, but I mean, it's a name. We used to pronounce it like that. Other people say Sanguis Cinis, maybe, I don't know. In Mexico, people said something sounding like Sanguis Cinis. You can pronounce it however you like. There are people called Martin, there are people called Martin. Pronunciation is up to you. It's just a name. Yeah. Well, the idea started before there was music. I was never in a band. I had never had the luck of being supported in any way, or like school. There was no way to join a band or something. I had no kind of support from my family, despite my father being a drummer in his youth. So I was interested in doing a band. I had this idea of doing a band. I was actually, like the typical kids drawing up the logo and designs in school while I was still in school. And I had several attempts to start something like a band. I remember meeting with a couple of guys in the rehearsal room of school, but at no point something came out of it. So I started drawing and taking photos and things like that. Well, at some point I got my hands on a keyboard. It was around that time when like the Phantom of the Opera started becoming popular and started showing in Vienna, I remember, and I went there early on and I was really fascinated by the organ, which is something I didn't hear. Growing up in a suburban area, I had to rely on the people around me with the music. That was before the internet. It was before anything. So I had a guy in my class. His big brother was kind of what I would consider like part of the maybe first generation or first wave of goth people in Austria. There were a couple of like the youth magazines. They had articles about what kind of music you would listen. So I would then go to the record shop like, hey, that's super cool. Like, check that out. I mean, it was the Standards, was kind of the Cure, which I never was a big fan of. Susie and the Banshees, Fields of the Nephilim, The Mission, Sisters of Mercy, and things like that. But when I heard like kind of the Phantom of the Opera, I thought like, well, it would be cool to do something like that. So I had a keyboard, but no one ever taught me how to play. So I just connected it to some amp and did some weird stuff in my room, basically, manipulating sounds in a like analog fashion. So when I started writing the first songs, got a guitar from somewhere, started trying out there. So I had some songs. Then at some point I got some people together and we took photos, which is more like people would do it on Instagram today. It's kind of the idea of a band. I had the band name long before I met someone. I had the idea of the band, so I kind of almost used them as like models for a casting band or something. We didn't even play or record anything or rehearse anything. It was all mostly in my mind. So when I then at a later stage started going to the capital, the big city, where there was stuff going on, obviously. So start getting into that in the basically early 90s. I always thought of myself of being, or musically being really like connected and rooted in the first generation of bands, but therefore being part of the second generation. Um, I saw an interview with the guy from Motley Crue where they talked about that like bands like AC/DC kind of refuse to listen to new music and have their stuff and only listen to the stuff from the decade before. So I have kind of this feeling of a lot of bands listen to a previous generation, um, not too much the contemporary music they're compared with. And for me, it was kind of a similar way. I know that a lot of people, when we started off early on, they said like we sound like Lacrimosa, for example. Um, while I like, to be honest, while I was really interested in their first album, I was kind of, this is new, this has the organ, this is what I wanted to do. Hey, there's someone else doing that, and I kind of liked the first album, but then I really lost interest at some point. It's like at the latest stage, at the third album was kind of, nah, I'm not into that. But I was interested in when the first there were magazines, obviously the Zillow magazine from Germany. That was my really venture in the larger field of, I mean, the Gothic scene, basically outside of my own bubble in suburbia and the couple of people you meet in Vienna. So seeing what happened there and that they used the German language, bands like the Sichen, I was interested, and I was really like happy to work with Bruno later on for the Amnesia album. But at this point in the beginning, I was just like wanting to do a band that has the feeling of the bands I grew up with. This is also another mystery. A lot of people asked, what does 1986 mean? Because I put it on all the early releases. And it's something actually I used to use as a description when I made music with Ashley, who now does like Whispers in the Shadow. But we were aiming for a sound that sounded like it is from 1986. So that was our kind of the word for this feels right. This feels like music from the heart. So yeah, jumping back to, obviously when I met him, was early on. We got introduced by friends, and he had a guitar and he wanted to do some music, and we were both really new to all of this. So we started trying out stuff, basically. So we started off alone with he had some money and we got a drum computer, and we took it from there, did some interesting first steps, and then basically signed off on like an agreement that we gonna appear, we do our first live show at a party, just being the both of us, having no idea how to do it, no basically equipment. He had some guys, he had some friends that could help him out, but we realized, hey, we're in a band now, let's do band stuff. How does it work? No idea. No one ever taught me anything about that, and so it was all learning by doing. But we realized, okay, cool, we have a month or so, or until the show, but we're actually not really a band. And then someone said like, hey, Richard Lederer, he's in these bands. He's kind of in a black metal band under another name that's really successful. He has this medieval band. He's doing lots of stuff. He might be interested. So we talked to him, and he was into it. He was like, yeah, let's do it. So within a month or so, we kind of wrote the first set for the concert, which later on became the demo tape, and ultimately I think probably more than like 50, 60, maybe even up to 70% of what we wrote for the first show became the first album later on. So we kind of tried that out, played locally. There was no real scene. I still remember someone in Vienna telling me like, so you want to have like a goth band in Vienna? There's no way, it's pointless. There's no way you can do anything. Forget it. There's no scene. No one from Austria ever made it, basically. So we did some local shows, really, the weird stuff that's like almost talent shows somewhere in the countryside where people are like, what the fuck? They were more like the mainstream. I mean, later on, we had some more people. We at some point we were five, 6 people. We had tried out weird stuff with a flute, um, and 2 guitars at some point. So it became more metal, more hard. So we were put together with the gothic metal stuff, which was really booming back then. All the like Theater of Tragedy, when Paradise Lost kind of changed their style. So people thought we would be part of that in a way. So, but we never really wanted to be aware. So there was a kind of a strange situation to be in. And at some point, we had some interest. I think there was some general feeling that we might be like an interesting band because we looked different. We did something people weren't used to see from an Austrian band. You might see it from a German band, so obviously they were like, "Ah, you're one of them. You try to be like them," but we never kind of attempted to be part of anything. Um, if anything, I thought a bit of if every band has their own style and their own place in the at the German Gothic revival at this point, I thought like we had our own niche. I thought there was like kind of Lacrimosa did the one thing, Das Ich did the one thing, Goethe Serben did the thing, even Umbra et Imago did their own thing, and we had our own part in that, not being one of them or sounding like one of them, at least in our opinion. After some major disasters, some major failures where we tried to do a first show that went so badly that we kind of swore to never make music again. At some point we tried again, and then the ball started rolling. Basically, we had some good shows. We had not really sold out because we didn't sell tickets. It was all amateur stuff where like someone is paying you at the entry. We didn't even know how many people, but let's say the venues were full. And then it happened that a new record company opened in Liechtenstein, which is a tiny place next or part of Switzerland, or not to offend someone, but it's kind of between the Austrian and Swiss border. And they started a new label, and basically they were after Richard, who was quite well known in the let's say black metal scene, because at this point already a lot of people were moving away from the cliche more to the instrumental stuff. So it was the time when black metal changed from like just guitar bass dirty stuff to the more symphonic stuff, and he was a big deal in that. So they wanted to sign him with his new project, but he was kind of hesitant because it was a new label. So what he then said, which was luck for us, is kind of, hey, I have this band I'm always also a part of, check them out. And they were really interested, so they signed us on as I think the second or third band. They only had the first band they had was them, was basically the band of the label owner, and another like a black metal band from Switzerland. So and for him it was kind of a test shot to see what the record company can do. And as it turned out, they had a sponsor or something. They had some guy who gave them a lot of money. So they had, I mean, we're not talking about the streaming, the time where people here are struggling. We're talking about the time when you can still make money out of music, big time, even in the alternative scene. Closer to the 80s than it's today. It's crazy to think how close we were still to the 80s, to the good old days. So they had a shitload of money, and we told them basically they were not really familiar with the goth scene and things like that. So we told them like, there's this magazine, do promotion here, do promotion there. And I mean, they paid for 2 music videos with a guy who was really also a big deal because he did something major in the German TV. So he was really well known. He did a documentary about some, like, I think metal or something. So they put a lot of money in us. And promoted us, so it kind of worked. At some point, then some magazines started noticing us, and they put us. Well, they did a couple of interviews. We had the first interview, I remember, was what a stinker. With all the comparisons, they really wanted to basically make fun of us. So they were just asking, like, fishing for answers they can use against us, and we were like really noobs, so all the answers were kind of really naive. Then they turned us around and made the first ever article that came out in a music magazine that does no longer exist was kind of, how ridiculous we are. And we kind of freaked out. Like, basically we sent them a letter, you cannot say that, freedom of speech here and there, but you cannot insult us in a way, so we will send us the lawyers, blah blah blah. So it was kind of a split early on in between those who kind of laughed at us and didn't take us seriously, and the other magazine that really promoted us. So it became this polarizing, like, bullshit, like, like everyone says today, like, hey, love him or hate him. But it helped us a lot, like, by them writing all this bullshit and bad reviews about us. A lot of people started noticing us. We're like, who is this band? We're supposed to be the worst band ever. And they're like, hey, well, it's actually not that bad. So yeah, and that's when things got like rolling. That was after the first album. We were not really aware of any success or anything yet. We went to a studio in Switzerland, actually, to record the first album. Again, no idea what to do, and the problem here is, well, there are two kinds of studios, basically. You have one that it's just pressing record and giving you, like, this is what you recorded, and then there's something like a producer. We were pretty unfortunate to have someone who just recorded whatever we brought them and did not give any feedback, like, hey guys, maybe cut this part or maybe double that. So it was basically first take, like, sing, okay, sing once, okay, that's it. No editing, no nothing. I mean, it has a certain rough charm to it, but I think it could have been done. It could have done better, and that obviously also led to some criticism, which made me kind of disregard the album, because kind of it got to my head, like, oh, it's shit. But then after some years, I listened to it again and I was actually surprised what we managed to put out without any experience or also, like, training. Yeah, and I think I'm gonna end here, and we'll see if someone is actually interested in that stuff. Yeah, so maybe till next time, if I feel like it, maybe, I don't know. See ya.